Welcome to the AIM Spotlight Series. I'm Dr. Karina Testa. I'm the owner of AIM Sports Medicine and Physical Therapy in Hermosa Beach, and I'm the host of the AIM Spotlight Series. With us today is someone that I have known for many years. She has a wealth of knowledge, and I know you're going to learn so much from. Registered dietitian Jeanne Peters. Together with her husband, Dr. Alan Peters, she founded Nourshing Wellness 21 years ago, and it's located down in Redondo Beach Harbor. Together, they specialize in functional medicine and they focus on healthy aging for both men and women. So welcome, Jeanne.
Thank you, Karina. Good to be here. It's going to be a pleasure to catch up.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I always like to start with, tell me about how you first got into nutrition and what sparked your interest in that area.
Oh, wow. That's going back. Oh my gosh, that's going back to like the 70s. So if anybody is still around, if you're in my age category, I was an athlete and I was a gymnast and was a swimmer and a runner. And I was fortunate to have a mother and father who really believed in fitness. And I really always thought nutrition was like something that could help give me an edge. And so I got fascinated with sports nutrition before it was even a thing. So yeah, no, I was like the captain of my swim team, and then I ended up going ahead and getting a water safety instructor license so I could teach swimming lessons and I could coach, and always incorporated nutrition. It was just a love of mine from probably from the time I was a teen. So it was never
Wow.
anything I had to like work at to
Yeah,
like
yeah.
find, pleasure. It was I love and still do, just love the healing power of nutrition and what it can do for us.
That is amazing, and it's such a hot topic now with in so many areas, and especially with those of us that are over 50 and trying to age gracefully and in a healthy, positive way for sure.
Yes, yes.
Great.
So yeah, so no, I actually, and I feel like right now there's even more of a, there's more possibilities of how, as a dietitian, you can pursue a career
Hmm.
in which you don't have to just be working in a hospital, that
Right.
there's just so many different avenues. And I was fortunate to take, one of those avenues. I started working at Pritikin Longevity Center. And, at that time, lifestyle medicine was just coming into its being. But that was a center in Santa Monica that was really advocating the power of nutrition to help heal the body.
Yeah, that's definitely revolutionary back then. People were not. I
Yes.
remember Pritikin and I remember the books and that kind of thing, but that was very kind of very new concepts back then.
I wouldn't necessarily advocate it today. I mean, for me, it was really rough because at that time it was like a no added fat diet, and I was an
Ooh,
athlete all my life. And so I can remember starving, like a good part of my work day. Thank God fats don't have the rap that they had back then. We've
right,
come a
right.
long way,
We certainly have. Well, and what prompted you and Alan, we also call him Doc, right? What
Right.
prompted the two of you to start Nourishing Wellness?
It's interesting. He was the chief of emergency medicine. I met him because I was in an accident and, he was like the
Oh,
doctor that treated me. And it was kind of like love at first sight. I
oh
mean,
my gosh.
it was crazy. But at that time, we independently didn't know each other, but we found out that we were training for the same little mini triathlon. They used to call them Olympic size triathlons. We were training for it. And back then, we really already had like a desire to like optimize health, nutrition. It was just part of who we were. And after years of being an ER doc, you burn out. And my husband was really deep in burnout. And the doctors advised him to take some time off, which he did. And he went to see a physician who wanted to put him on Prozac because he said,
Gosh.
you're in burnout, Prozac. And he was on Prozac for like 2 weeks and realized this made me feel horrible. It killed my libido. And sex was always really important to us. So he went ahead and started looking and found a Senegenics and went back to school and got you don't get a degree, but he got a
Right.
certification in hormone health.
Hmm.
And at that time, he found out that like he was very low in testosterone and actually started on a short a dose of testosterone, and it made a life difference for him. So he left the ER and decided, we're going to do this. I mean, we only had about 3 or 4 clients when we first made that decision, but it grew because, just like menopause is dealing with, it's
Yeah,
having its day right now in terms
right.
of, so many women becoming much more aware of the perimenopause, menopause journey.
Hmm.
I'm hoping that day will come in which we have equal amount of awareness around andropause, because it's also something that really impacts men's, not only their libido, but their muscle mass, their brain, their heart. So yeah, we are not serving our men as well as we could. There's definitely an
Yeah.
awareness gap about andropause, which is male menopause. So that's how we got
And
started 22 years ago, and we have probably about 200 and maybe 35 clients, which is just perfect size for us to
mhm.
manage. And I would say 60% of it are men and 40% are women.
Wow. So it is more men than women.
It
That's
is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so how have things changed in your practice since you first started? Has there been an evolution of
I think
how you treat people or philosophies that you use now?
the philosophy that we had right from the very beginning was that hormones were not going to be enough. That was not really the point. It was to really show people that it was probably because of their lifestyle habits and their eating
Mhm.
habits that contributed to maybe hormone havoc. A
Okay.
perfect example would be, a man or a woman that was burning the candle at both ends, maybe in their 40s, trying to go and do, being a good parent and getting to every one of their kids' games, but at the same time, maybe their workload or their career life was such that, they were staying up from 9 to midnight just to get work done, so there's like that burnout that I think
Yes.
occurs. And so it was really teaching people about the power of sleep and lifestyle and how diet, maybe not making those kinds of choices when you feel like I'm starving.
Right.
So, you're buying a bag of chips, instead looking at like, when was the last time I had a good protein meal? When did I go ahead and, make sure I got some activity in that would help to wire my brain in such a way that I would feel better. So yeah, lifestyle habits, stress reduction, learning how to eat well has always been, a big component of our practice, but then also adding in bioidentical hormones when needed,
Yeah.
looking at the
Yeah.
comprehensive labs that
Hmm.
would give impact to like your stress, your sex, your thyroid hormones.
Got it.
So trying to find a balance
So
amongst
is
all of these ideas.
for sure, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, is it still today? Is that still your typical client, the 40 something
No,
that's
I'd say our
burning it, or
clients
is
have
it?
grown with us. So our average client right now is like 73,
Oh,
and our
okay.
oldest client is 87,
Okay.
and still he's doing extremely well. Like he's
Yeah.
still very active. He's not working, but my husband's 84 and he, works 25, 30 hours a week. So he's a he's a good example of what we're trying to advocate, that,
Yeah.
that if you take good care of yourself, your body will serve you.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm thrilled to be able to say that we've got a very healthy group in our practice.
That's great. That's great. Well, what are some of the common problems that you help solve for clients, or maybe particularly the newer clients that you have versus your clients that are more
I
steady
would
on their
say the
path?
number one thing that people come into our practice with is that they feel like they don't have the energy to match their needs.
Energy. So
So
that's the big one.
yeah, so energy and believe it or not, for a lot of men and women, they're concerned maybe because they're starting to see like a menopausal belly or an andropausal belly. Sometimes I think when we slow down and maybe our hormone health is off a little bit, we'll
Mhm.
see fat add up in the belly. So one of the first things that we do with every client that comes in, besides doing comprehensive testing, is doing a
Mhm.
body composition test.
Okay, can you talk more
Body
about what
composition.
that is? What does that involve, and what does it tell you?
It's a great question. Yeah, so it's really looking at your muscle to fat ratio. It's a simple test that we do that is just putting some electrodes on the body, and it runs a little, it first measures all the muscle and then the fat, but also your
Okay.
water, and
Uh-huh.
then even just how healthy your cells are holding that water. So it's
Okay.
called phase angle. And phase angle has become an important metric you see now in many hospitals that are teaching hospitals in which they're looking at cancer patients, because we know
Mhm.
phase angle is related to your overall cell membrane strength. So we're looking at what can we do to optimize muscle to fat ratio. So looking at
Okay.
like, how could we ensure that our patients don't lose muscle? And what can we do if they've got more body fat than ideal? What can we do to help them lower that body fat so that actually there's maybe a little bit more muscle than there is fat? That is like ideal.
So the test tells you the ratios or the percentages?
It takes the percentages. So
Okay.
you're looking at like percentage of muscle mass, fat-free mass, body fat mass, lean body mass, skeletal muscle mass. I mean, it's a BIA type test.
Okay.
So bioimpedance.
Okay, thank you. I'm like, what does BIA mean?
I know. It's just actually looking at like metrics that a sort of resistance and reactance. It doesn't mean anything. Don't get worked up with the
Yeah,
words, but just think in terms of we now know that people who can preserve their muscle mass just live longer, healthier lives. I mean, you know this being in, running AIM. I mean,
right.
we're doing everything we can to help preserve that muscle mass, that connective tissue, those ligaments. That kind of tissue is something that we actually can get a measurement on that can help us get a baseline and then what we can do to optimize that baseline.
Does it also tell you where the fat is distributed? Because especially
It's not as conscientious. It's not like a DEXA scan where you
okay,
could. So a DEXA scan is the gold standard in my mind. But it does tell us how much visceral fat. And we know
okay,
the visceral fat is,
yeah.
that abdominal fat that's hugging the organs, that is the most inflammatory. And so, anything that we can do to help our patients lower that is just going to lower inflammation and help their metabolic health.
So is it what because I've learned a lot about visceral health in especially in my own situation with having gone through breast cancer and losing
Yes.
my estrogen and thus losing my waistline. Can
Yes,
you talk
yes.
about a little bit how those hormones, either from something like cancer or just with aging, how the change in those hormones affects our waistline and affects the visceral fat that I never had when I was 25?
Yes. I mean, when you think of 20, well, maybe in your, teens when you were having periods,
Hmm.
your estrogen progesterone ratio varied every month. So estrogen is such an amazing hormone. It's what gives us this kind of metabolic, waistline. It's what gives us our curves. It's what helps to support our heart health. It's what keeps our blood vessels nice and flexible.
Hmm.
It helps with our connective tissue and our ligaments. Dr. Vonda Wright is an orthopedic surgeon who's now on she's an influencer for sure, just really helping women to understand the connection between having more muscle mass and more bone mass. So
Okay.
there's a nice little connection there. So yeah, think of estrogen as your friend, and then progesterone is kind of like if estrogen was a sister to progesterone. Progesterone would be like the calming sister, the one that helps us to sleep, the one that helps us to calm down, when we've got maybe a lot of stress in our lives. Estrogen's maybe more the energetic sister that really helps us to feel that kind of energy to get tasks done. So it's
Hmm.
just finding this balance between these two hormones that can help women. And then in men, it would be testosterone. And believe it or not, men produce a little bit of estrogen as well.
Hmm.
They need it for their heart. We all produce cortisol, which is kind of our
Yes.
fight or flight hormone.
Our
So
stress hormone,
cortisol,
right?
yeah, you
Yeah.
remember that
Yeah.
because that was one of the ones that I think that we've always tried to get yours down because you were running a business. Being, the head of AIM, it was not has not been probably an easy task. This
Not the
challenge.
most relaxing. It's very rewarding, but it's not always the most relaxing.
Exactly. I saw that with myself, Karina. I remember when I was like PTA president, and I'm thinking, why? Why did I do this? And my cortisol shot up right away for that year. In any event, it's, part of what we're trying to do is just to find that balance because think of when our bodies are more in balance, there's more of a harmony. And I
Mhm.
honestly think there's more of a rhythm. And rhythm, I believe, is a carrier of health. And anything that we can do in which we can optimize people's rhythms, whether it's around their eating, their sleeping, maybe their stress patterns. It's just like when you raised your children, you looked at like, how do we keep that rhythm going? Because we know that they'll sleep better if we do. And that starts at a very, very young age. So we're just trying to do what we did with our young kids with our older adults.
That is true. And I certainly feel that because I am an older mom. I had my children a lot later. So then what happens then? For me, it was a little bit more drastic because I suddenly had to deal with breast cancer and
Yes,
quick overnight into menopause and estrogen blockers.
exactly.
But for other people that are just naturally going through their 50s, whether women or men, and that is the time when the hormones start to decrease. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, we're finding out right now that, if we're looking at men and their testosterone, we wouldn't even think about looking at testosterone levels with a man that was under 50.
Hmm.
But now we're seeing even men as young as 35 to 40 in our practice
Wow.
with testosterone levels of, let's say, a prepubescent girl. And
Wow.
some of that we feel is part of culture. People are just pushing themselves harder, but also it can be just the fact that we're exposed to so much more toxins that have an impact on just the way that testosterone is being produced, the amount of semen that men produce, the amount of fertility that we see in both men and women. And the same thing is true with women. We're seeing women going into perimenopause earlier, and so it can be starting as early as the 40s, where women
Wow.
are starting to have lower progesterone levels as sort of the classic.
Hmm.
And then estrogen declining as well. So, perimenopause can start sooner than, many women might think of. And the classic symptoms are often just the fatigue, maybe not
Hmm.
sleeping as well, having some night sweats. You remember that.
Yeah.
When you went into immediate menopause,
Yeah.
those night sweats, those night hot flashes, and that.
Uh-huh.
So yes, those are some of the common issues that we see, and why, as we get people into the practice, we want to look at what can we do to help change that around. And one of the first things we look at is sleep. Really,
Hmm.
what can we do to help improve people's sleep? Because sleep is like the great healer. If you
Right.
can get
Right.
6 or 7 hours of sleep, that's your body makes its hormones in sleep. So whether you're looking at cortisol could start as early as the sun goes down. As soon as the sun goes down, we have the potential to start building our cortisol all the way up until, let's say, when the sun rises.
Hmm.
So, cortisol, we need a longer period of time to build it because we use so much of it during the day.
Yeah.
But like estrogen and progesterone, those hormones or testosterone, they're built during sleep. So
Is
that
there an
rest.
ideal number of hours that you suggest someone sleeps, or is this?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we now know that if people can get closer to 7 hours, maybe 8 hours of sleep, those hormones like growth hormone, human growth hormone, estrogen, progesterone, just some of your other hormones like aldosterone, some of these things that have that really influence your pituitary gland are
Hmm.
built during, let's say, 10 p.m. until like 2 a.m. So deeper sleep typically tends to be in the early part of our sleep cycle, and REM tends to, cycle in and out. But deep sleep is where that's where we really heal our
Okay.
muscle tissue from the day's previous exercise, or our hormones, particularly like our human growth hormones. So yeah, I think sleep is really underrated. And we are in a culture that's, I mean, we're looking at our phones until 11,
Right.
or maybe
Yeah.
watching TV, and then, our eyes and our bodies just can't quite click into deep sleep the way we ought to.
I think that's fascinating. And
Yeah,
then,
I'm a big fan of any way that we can track sleep. So I have a Garmin,
oh,
so I can look at my Garmin, but I also have an
uh,
Aura list.
so
Oh,
do I.
yay, I love it. So do you look at your sleep scores when you
I
first wake
do.
up?
I've been wearing it since 2020, so I've been tracking for 5 years. And I
Fantastic,
do
Karina.
look at my sleep scores constantly. I happen to be a pretty good sleeper.
Oh,
So,
I love it.
yeah,
That's a
yeah, I'm
that's a
lucky.
big deal.
As long as my kids don't wake me up in the middle of the night. But other than that,
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure you notice, like, if you're jet lagged or something from
yes,
travel, your deep
yes,
sleep isn't going to be as good. But, I think if you're a good sleeper, that really is like
help.
that really helps you
Yeah.
to, build that strength.
Well, and something you said, with hormones starting to decline earlier and earlier now, yet we're living longer and longer. We're really contending with 30, 40 years of a declining hormone situation. How can we affect that with our nutrition, and how can we, what do you suggest that we do with, because you mentioned muscle mass, like how do we combat the muscle mass loss and improve our nutrition to help us in
I think
those
it's a
30 to
really
40
important
years?
thing. In fact, I'm happy to go ahead and pass on a brochure that I use with all of my clients that might be helpful for your clients as well.
Hmm.
So after I do my body composition and I know
Okay.
how much lean muscle mass, I then try to figure out exactly what a person's protein needs are.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
So we do know that starting like in the late 50s, our protein needs actually go up a little bit, partly because we don't have maybe the same enzymes that we had when we were in our 20s to break down proteins into those
Mhm.
amino acids that then become muscle mass. So we know that we need a little bit more. And I have a little formula which would be great for your clients just to be able to figure out. It's actually in this little handout. So basically, think in terms of whatever is your ideal body weight. So my ideal body weight's 133. So if I times that by 0.8, I come up with 106 grams of protein.
Okay.
I'm an athlete and I actually feel I need more than that because I work out 7 to 10 hours a week. So I times my protein needs based on my weight. So I
Okay.
try to shoot for 125 to like 130 grams of protein. If you were to divide that by four, you would be looking at like maybe 30 grams a meal, or,
Okay.
maybe 30 grams a meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then maybe like 15 to 30 for a snack. And that really, I know women and men who try to achieve that just do better. They just have better muscle synthesis because they're giving themselves the substrate that they need
That's
to
what I
be
was going
able
to
to
say. The
support
the
protein.
protein is what gives you the building blocks to build more of this muscle mass.
Exactly.
Okay.
So think of protein breaks down to amino acids, and those amino acids are needed, for enzymes, they're needed for your brain chemicals. So, whatever you eat, let's say at 10 a.m., becomes like your brain chemicals, your dopamine, and it's for sure your dopamine by at least noon. So that's, the key neurotransmitter that helps us with thinking and memory and self-efficacy. So I just think protein is just, if it's one nutrient that I really try to have all of my clients focus on, it's that one.
Okay.
Because even if somebody's trying to lose weight, if they can get their protein needs met in a kind of a rhythmic way throughout the day, they're much less likely to feel hungry, to have those late cravings in that afternoon or maybe in the evening.
Hmm.
They're more likely to have more that dopamine hit where they just feel like a sense of self-efficacy, like I can do this, I can do the work that I need to get done. They have maybe a better recovery with their workouts.
Okay.
So I just feel, we try to make sure that everybody knows exactly what that protein. And then, by the way, that's not easy. I have to say, it was not easy for me. It took a lot of intention when I really started putting this into practice. I was getting about 67 to 75 grams of protein a day, and I am a dietitian. I just thought I was doing better until I
Yes.
started tracking and looking. And then I remember you used to be so good
Yes.
about
Yes.
chronometer. And so when I got onto chronometer and saw, I thought, I can't do this intermittent fasting. I can't get the protein in. And I was definitely seeing it. So I built up my protein and my muscle mass, that is. I have more muscle mass now at 69 than I did at 59.
Now, is that solely from the nutrition part of it, or did you also add in weight training and exercises that help you build your muscles?
I was doing strength training before it was popular. So I started that like when I was 55. But honestly, when I started
Mm-hmm.
eating after a workout, eating significant protein after a workout and carbohydrates, and making a point to get my protein needs met. I could see my muscle mass going up, almost, every year. So I'm really happy with where I'm at right now. And I guess if there's anything that I feel even happier about is knowing that women and men can achieve that. It's not something in which it's not possible. It does take some intention, though. The
Right.
handout that
Right.
I'm going to give you has also all the most common animal protein and the plant proteins, because most people don't just do one or the other
Yes.
unless they're a vegan. And so it would help your clients to know ways that they could get their protein needs met and how with the
Well,
food.
that's what I was going to ask. Are all proteins the same? Are there certain proteins we should focus on, like pasture-raised eggs or grass-fed beef and chicken versus others that are out there? Does that make a difference?
It absolutely does, because I mean, I do think, we're omnivores, so we're meant to be eating, a wide variety of foods. And it's just easier, if you eat meat, fish, and poultry, it's going to be easier to get those protein needs met. But on the other hand, not everybody is. And, some people really follow maybe more of a Mediterranean diet, in which, you're going to get that from beans and lentils and some of the other, maybe as nuts and seeds,
Hmm.
would be a part of the way that you would contribute to your overall intake. And so it's just good for people to see the sheet because it'll give them better ideas.
Yeah,
I know that if you're a vegan, it's a little harder to go ahead and get your protein needs met, just because you have to eat so many more carbohydrates
right.
in those foods. So like, think in terms of, maybe a half a cup of lentils is maybe 10 grams of protein. But let's say if that was the only way that you were getting it, you probably would have to eat like maybe a cup and a half, over the course of a day. So that could be, for somebody who's trying to lose weight, a little bit more challenging, but it's all doable. That's why I
Yeah,
love this profession, because we can
yeah. There's
always figure out a way to make it work for
right.
anyone.
Right. And I know you're always been a big proponent of actual food, eating actual
Yes,
food
yes.
versus
Bars.
bars and that kind of thing. And what is there a place though for adding supplements or something like that, or is it on a case by case basis, or certain people need it and certain people don't, or
No, I
how
think,
does that work?
like I would think of protein powder as a supplement.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I think it can make a huge difference for somebody. I mean, I just was working with a man who's going through cancer right now, and he just doesn't have much of an appetite, but he can
Yeah.
drink. So we've
Okay.
been able to, put more protein into his into shakes that he can sip on, and he's doing much better. So yes, we just figure out what your situation is, what's your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I found for myself, Karina, that I'm a coffee drinker, and I
Okay.
found that when I added like a tablespoon of, I have two different protein powders that mix instantly with hot drinks.
Mm-hmm.
I just found, oh my gosh, my workouts were so much better. So when I have, let's say, as a pre-workout, I'll put protein powder into my coffee, and I just feel
Interesting.
like everything works better with that
Yeah.
little extra protein in there. For
Okay,
my
I had not thought of that, of a coffee enhancer being a protein powder. Very
Yes,
interesting.
I'll give you the link afterwards
Yeah.
so you got that.
I
It
love
makes a
that.
difference. In fact,
Yeah.
I'll put it on the sheet, because I think it'd be good for your clients to know
Okay.
that there are a couple that mix instantly.
Well, now, okay, so let's switch from, we know that protein is good. What about carbohydrates? And what about the talk now about glucose and insulin resistance and the tests that some people might take? I think A1C is a big one, and they
Right.
find out that they're pre-diabetic and they're supposed to cut back on carbohydrates. How do we handle carbohydrates in all of this?
I think that's a really good question, because, we're seeing an increase in prediabetes as well as diabetes. So, what I look at is we need carbs. I mean, those are your source of energy. And, the time in which, and the kind of carbs that I advocate would not be so processed. Those are the ones that's really killing our American diet.
Yeah.
The ones that just are full of sugar and, just break down really quickly. Like even a piece of whole wheat bread, nobody would think of whole wheat bread, but it can put like 2 tablespoons of sugar into your blood, in like less than an hour. So we're looking at carbohydrates that carry a lot of nutrients, but also fiber. So
Fiber, yes.
I'm thinking like beans and lentils, if you're following more of like a Mediterranean diet, or
Mhm.
hummus, or, maybe, using some fruits and vegetables to like balance out a meal just for texture and interest. But, we have some people who just really, I actually have a pregnant woman right now who's super sensitive. So she's got gestational diabetes. And I found for her, that she was so sensitive that I had to go ahead and increase her fat, increase her protein, and keep her carbohydrates to like maybe a third of a cup of fruit with her breakfast. Having her give up oatmeal in lieu of like eggs, but
Hmm.
having some fruit really helped just make it more manageable and delicious. But her blood sugars, she was using a meter, she put the
Hmm.
little glucometer on her arm, and she did better with protein and fat and a little less carbohydrates. So it is really individual. And I just think, again, because she had to be able to manage the needs of her growing child, we just made sure that she had our carbs with always either protein and fat or protein, fat, and fiber. So fiber is kind of protein, fat, and fiber is kind of like the trifecta that I find really helps
Yeah.
people stabilize their blood sugars. And you found that out too. You
Yep.
remember like
I had
4 days.
gestational diabetes twice, and I actually am pre-diabetic now. So, yeah, and just trying to understand how when you combine, like you said, fats and protein and fiber with the carbohydrate, can you talk a little bit about how that affects how much glucose actually goes into your bloodstream?
It's a great question. So think of like if you just took like a third of a cup of apple juice,
Hmm.
there's nothing in there
Which
to
I would
stop.
never do, by the way. I don't do.
Yes, of course, no. But even like some people are so sensitive to even like a banana. So let's just say you just instead of that, you just ate a ripe banana. You know, there's not that much fiber in a banana. So I mean, you're going to see your blood sugar start to rise within 15 minutes.
Hmm.
And maybe it'll spike after about an hour. But if you put peanut butter on that banana,
Okay.
and maybe even one in which it's nutty peanut butter, so you've got the fiber from the nuts, dip that maybe into some flax seeds or something, and you ate that, that fat and those fiber, would actually slow down that banana. So maybe you'd get more of a blunted effect. It wouldn't just peak like a mountain. It would be more like a wave. And the same thing is true, if you had, let's say, those blueberries. Maybe you had the blueberries, but you put it into Greek yogurt. So there's your fiber, your fat. Let's say you ate low fat Greek yogurt. So there's some fat in there, and then there's the protein. Those berries probably aren't even going to make much of a dent if you put like a third of a cup of berries. So think of protein and fat as a way to modulate how fast sugar can get into the bloodstream.
Hmm.
And that's basically how these GLP-1s are working. Like when you think of like semaglutide or
Yeah.
Ozempic, they're producing the same kind of hormonal effect that we get when we eat protein and fat. So it's having like this suppression of appetite. So that's why I try to help people learn how can they build a meal that has at least protein, fat, fiber along with their carbs at every meal.
And you mentioned the continuous glucose monitors. Do you use those in your practice? Do you have patients?
Absolutely. Oh, we found
Yeah.
there. And I just wish that insurance would cover it because it's such a great eye opener when
Hmm.
somebody puts on one of these, meters for 2 weeks, and then they start eating what would be part of their traditional diet, and they can
Hmm.
see the impact of how
Yeah.
much their sugars go up, based on stress or a banana or like juice or like alcohol. Anything that would just fly into the bloodstream really quickly is just eye-opening for many of these patients.
Well, and as you mentioned, in your with your pregnant patient, certain things that you thought might not spike her did, and so I think that's kind of an interesting concept that not everybody reacts the same to the same food, and perhaps
Oh, for
that's our
sure.
genetics, or perhaps that's our environment, or perhaps that's our current stress level as to how we process some of these foods, and what a great way to be able to see how things react with your own body immediately.
She's somebody that's so interesting. And it's a great piece to bring up to your clients because
Hmm.
after every meal, she went out and took a 10-minute walk. And she had the meter on, so she could see in real time that just that 10-minute walk, even though she didn't maybe get her blood sugars up past like 120,
Hmm.
she brought them down to like 100 within like a 10-minute walk. That's the
Amazing.
power of exercise too,
That's
and you saw
a good
that
point.
as well,
Yeah.
just how much a walk could blunt your sugars from spiking. So it's just your muscles are like a sponge, and they want to pull that sugar into the muscles. And so think of walking or any kind of exercise is just a great way to go ahead and get that insulin levels to fall. And insulin levels to fall is because the cells are more receptive. They're more receptive to take that sugar in when you are active.
That's an excellent point because I mean, back when I had gestational diabetes, we didn't have the CGMs, and I was constantly pricking my finger and then walking up
Oh
and
my
down the
gosh, it's
stairs.
awful. Yeah, no, you're
It was
just your
yeah.
fingers. No, no more, please.
Well, I know what is the effect? What's the long-term effect of having high glucose levels? Because I would imagine most people don't even know that they have high glucose levels, and if they're even being tested with an A1C, which can you explain what the A1C test
That's a
shows
great
them?
question. So that's the glycation effect of sugar on your red blood cells. So it's
Okay.
looking at like red blood cells are floating through your body, but if all of a sudden they start glycating, they start clumping together. And so the little tiny capillaries that are like in your brain or in your toes or fingers, those cells can't get through. So you start losing, your ability to get this blood flow. And the place where I think it has the biggest impact, Karina, is honestly our brain, because our
Mm,
brain is tiny little capillaries. So they're calling high blood sugars or, high hemoglobin A1Cs. It's almost like a pre-diabetes or Alzheimer's is considered pre-diabetes, diabetes of the brain. So cognitive decline, dementia is very much connected to people who
mhm.
have those more elevated levels. So for every tenth of a point that you see your blood sugars go up, let's say it went from 5.5 to 5.6, that's your blood sugars going from approximately 95 up to 100. And if it goes up another tenth of a point, your average blood sugar is probably like 105. But likewise, if you can bring it down a tenth of a point, you're bringing your average blood sugars down. That's freeing your body up from all this sticky blood. Sticky
Yeah.
blood, sticky brain,
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
sticky brain, we don't remember where
We
our
don't
kids
want that.
are. We don't remember, who we're sleeping next to.
Well, and an A1C test is a look back test. It looks back at
It's three
your
months. Yes, it's
three
looking
months.
over
Okay.
3 months of what your blood sugars have been like.
So
So I think it's,
it's
what's
more of a
that?
test that's going to tell you how well you've been doing, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what's happening right now, which I guess is what the glucose monitors can do.
Right. I think that's why it's a great combo. If
Mhm.
somebody is like feeling, wow, why can't I get this down? Put them on a glucose. And by the way, you don't have to be a diabetic to get one. So you can buy one.
Okay.
If you don't have diabetes, but you just want to know, but you do need to get a physician to write a prescription for you in order to have that. But it costs, maybe $60, and then you just use your phone. You can download, like
Mhm.
if you got the Freestyle Libre, you can download the app and then every time you go to read it, your app will give you a score. And then you have this in your phone so you can be able to take it to your physician and be able to show them,
Yeah,
that you're making some progress or that you have
that's
some
great.
concerns.
Are there any other tests that you like to have patients do when they first start with you that also helps them give you an idea of where their health is or where it's standing with certain things?
Certainly for metabolic health and inflammation, I always will do a C-reactive protein. So it's
Okay.
sensitive to looking at inflammation. And another one we like to do is fasting insulin, because we know as people's insulin levels start going up, it's a lot harder for their body fat to go down. It's almost like high fasting insulin puts a padlock on your fat stores. So it takes more effort, more intention. So if I can show a patient you started off at 17 and now you're down to 10. Wow, that's a huge improvement. So it's just another marker for motivation. Just
Okay.
like the hemoglobin A1C is, I think having C-reactive protein to look at inflammation and then also fasting insulin is just a motivator. Cortisol is a
Okay.
good one to know because if
Mhm.
you're somebody who feels like, I'm wired and tired at night, I can't fall asleep, or I wake up in the morning and I don't feel refreshed, chances are maybe you're not producing enough cortisol, or maybe you're producing so much that you're not able to like really wind down at the end of the day, like would be ideal. You're not releasing your melatonin enough to be
Mhm.
able to really be able to relax. And
Yeah.
so I think cortisol can be a really good marker. And it helps Certainly, if somebody's levels are high, it helps them understand why it is that I'm doing everything I can, I feel, to improve my weight and I'm not getting anywhere.
Okay, so it can maybe give you or give the patient clues as to why their efforts are not showing results.
Yeah, they're working out more and they're eating
Hmm.
less and they're still not seeing results. So cortisol, if I can get people to start lowering that, or maybe on the other side of it is that maybe their cortisol is so low they just don't have the energy. So then we look at there's teas and what we call adaptogenic herbs that are really nice for helping to just gently raise that cortisol. And then we work on sleep, making sure they're getting into bed maybe an hour earlier.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, now what do you recommend for bringing cortisol levels down? How do we
That's
do
a
that?
great question. Think of like cortisol as like a lever. So let's
Mhm.
just say you're you're on the freeway, you're on the 405 freeway, and you have an appointment that you cannot miss. Your
Yes.
cortisol, instead of going ahead and maybe putting out 2 or 3 units, it's putting out 13 units.
Okay.
Okay, if you keep doing that every single
Hmm.
day and you're only making 20 units, but your body is, putting out like 37, yeah, your cortisol's high. So you've got to go ahead and start looking at like, how can I use deep breathing? How could I use actually some adaptogenic herbs that instead of putting out 13 units, maybe you'd only put out two.
Hmm.
It's a combination of helping a client to become more aware. Like I found many clients when they go ahead and do
Yeah.
they're seeing that in real time, being on the freeway can actually cause their levels to go up.
Oh, wow.
Well,
Yeah.
if you're sitting in traffic, if you could learn to deep breathe, that box breathing, breathe
Hmm.
it for 4, hold it for 4, lower it for 4, hold it for 4. That is a powerful technique for helping to bring
Yeah,
someone's
that's,
cortisol, getting out and walking in nature.
oh, there's that exercise again, Jeannie.
Yes. But even taking your shoes off and walking on grounding
Yes.
has an
Not pavement
effect
though. Not
with.
pavement, but not
Yeah,
pavement,
just
but
like, on like if you have a backyard and, or
grass.
maybe a park where you could just take your shoes off and just going to the beach, walking in sand or water. It's amazing how that can just gently help us bring our cortisol levels back into balance.
I like that. That's a great
Yeah,
suggestion.
we're
Something
always
I wish
looking
I'd
at
hear
free
about it.
medicine because that's
Yes,
free. It
free
doesn't cost
medicine.
you
I like that.
anything.
Yeah. Can I circle back to the whole inflammatory process? So, what is people talk about inflammation and gut inflammation and gut health and um, what what is happening when we say that our gut is inflamed or we have an inflammatory diet, or how can we have a non-inflammatory, an anti-inflammatory diet? Because I hear that a lot with some of our patients who maybe we're dealing with healing and pain and actual inflammation, something swollen, but they ask a lot about, well, what can I eat or do differently to bring my inflammatory process down?
That's such a great question. But think about, eating. So your mouth to your anus is one long tube. And that if you were eating the three most inflammatory ingredients would
Hmm.
be, any of the processed oils.
Okay.
So, trans fats or canola oil or it just let's just say seed oils, sugar, and
Ah,
then,
sugar.
some kind of
How did we get
refined
this far
flour.
without saying sugar?
Yeah. I mean, it's just that's the trifecta right there that will increase inflammation. But then, we're exposed. We live in the South Bay, we have LAX and we have the freeways. And so we're getting a lot of petrochemicals that we're all breathing.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, you've got two refineries right around. So I live in El Segundo in Torrance. I mean, so we have many, many things that we're ingesting and breathing. But
Hmm.
I think food is a good place to start because if people are in pain, in chronic pain, there has been so many studies that have shown that if you could just shift your diet away from sugar and, processed fats and flours and just replace those calories, it's amazing how you can bring that pain can actually decrease. Pretty amazing. So think of your gut, if all of those ingredients are there, and the body just doesn't know what to do with a lot of this, it's sending signals to the brain,
Hmm.
that we're out of balance. And
Yeah.
so think of the gut and the brain. If we can help improve that by just making some shifts in our diet, even small shifts, like just giving up the stupid snacks that maybe a lot of us eat and replacing it with like apple with peanut butter or apple with almond butter, or, having some celery, in hummus, something simple. It's amazing how just even in a week, people can see an improvements in just how they
Wow.
feel.
Are there any tests that test gut biome or the
Yes.
microbiomes and that kind of thing?
Yes. I
Okay.
love this test. I've been using this for 15 years. It's called the GI map, and it's a stool test,
Mm-hmm.
but it will tell you if you have maybe it shows a lot of like the good bacteria that we all need. This came out of the gut biome project that happened 20 years ago, where we actually measured 40,000 people and we found out that there were certain kinds of bacteria that should be found in certain levels in the gut. So it's measuring that. It's then measuring the amount of bad guy bacteria. So just imagine, we have the good guys, but we also have the bad guys. And some of the bad guys can dwarf just from changes in our diet in a week. So you go
Wow.
down to Mexico, you eat like you drink like a fish, and you go ahead and eat like chips and just stupid foods. Yeah,
Right, right.
bacteria has already shifted. But it also says a lot, it gives a lot of inflammatory markers. So it actually looks at calprotectin and your pancreatic enzymes, and looking at several other markers that would indicate maybe you have food sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
And the test is covered by insurance for most people. And if you're Medicare, it doesn't cost you a penny. It's a great test to know.
That's
GI
awesome.
map, it's a
Yeah.
Diagnostic Solutions Lab. We have found a lot of interesting issues. We hardly ever have a patient who does it who doesn't at least get one thing that they find they could do that would help their gut health.
That's fascinating, fascinating, because it's just so much, and there's so much food out there right now that is so processed and so easy to grab and eat on the go that I think a lot of us are eating a lot of things that are not necessarily the best for us or not and not
Yeah,
helping all of these pathways that we talked about today. And I know you and Doc are living your best life, right? You've talked about your trips and your hiking and I
yeah, we're
think
so
yeah,
fortunate.
there's a
Yeah,
lot of
we're
people
actually,
who
yeah,
go
I'm
ahead, sorry.
69, he's 84. I mean, we have a trip planned. We're going down the Nile in January, and then I'm doing a biking trip around southern Spain in
Wow.
April. So yeah, I'm training
Yeah,
for that right now.
that's so great because I think there's so many people that are maybe in their 50s and 60s and they're thinking, I'm not going to have any energy or any strength or even have any physical fitness to take the trips that I thought I would take when I retired or, when my kids are out of the house and you're here to say that there are ways that we can make changes now that will help us.
Absolutely. To be free, to be
Yeah.
free of pain and free of chronic disease and free of having to be on medicines and, free to be able to do the things that are meaningful for you.
I like that. I like that. So how does someone get in touch with you if they want to start this journey and be guided by these principles?
Oh, thank you for asking. They can just call Nourishing Wellness is in Redondo Beach, and Nourishing Wellness Medical Center. So, www.nourishingwellness.com.
Perfect.
And or they can reach out to me. But you know what I'll do is I'll send you my handout. And then
Okay.
you can, anybody who's interested in listening to this, you'll have that to give to them. And my email is on there. So if anybody had a
Perfect.
question, they could send me an
Perfect.
email. And I
Perfect.
would love to, be able to you know, help your clients thrive. Everybody
Thank
deserves that
you.
at any age, Karina.
I love that. I feel like there's hope. There's
Yes,
hope
there
for us to
is.
be, I hope that I'm doing a cycling trip in a couple years when I'm not working as much. So I appreciate so much everything that you've
You.
with us today and shared with
Yeah,
us today because it really is important and it really does give people things that they can do to really take charge of their own life and maybe they need to have some of these tests done to know where they stand and what they need to work on and guidance from someone like you to push them in the right direction and help them synthesize all the information that's out there and make it more specific to what they're dealing with.
absolutely, Karina. That is all possible. So I think we're ending on a good note to just give people the message that you can age well no matter what your age is now. You can always get better and better. So,
That. Thank you,
all
Jeannie.
right, bring me back. I'd love to go ahead and continue the conversation sometime in the future.